Okay, so we're last week of September, and I've been working on quite a bit on the last work project over the last few weeks. So that was the watercolour version, really sort of individual studies, and that was the acrylic version I started last week. We've got a few things here that Sue's brought in, so if anybody would like these, please help yourselves. Leave them just there for a minute. So that was that. And then next month, going on to, there's a choice really. So it could be lino printing, which is what I'll really focus on to start with. And then the alternative project for those that don't want lino printing is autumn. So if you fancied autumn as a theme, that's quite a nice theme. So they were the choices we made. So I'll start with the lino printing next month. I thought I'd make a start on the autumn this week, just because it felt like we'd kind of come to the end of the glass work. If anybody wants the glass pieces to carry on, I can get them out of the van. If anybody needs the still life set up, so that's no problem. But I think quite a lot of people have moved on anyway, so I thought we'd want to look at it. I've brought a couple of books in that I've got on lino printing, a little bit of inspiration if anybody wants to have a quick look at those. And in terms of autumn, I've got a couple of photos here with photos, and I can get a few more printed off in a week. I also took a few over the last couple of days, a few misty scenes where we had a bit of mist, parks and things like that. So I thought they to me are very much an autumn thing, when it suddenly gets cool and you get the mists coming in. And bright sunshine on the mist is quite a nice sort of feel, I think, rather than just paint autumn leaves. One of the students this morning brought in a lovely still life made out of kind of leaves and autumn, pumpkins and things like that. So again, that's a nice idea if you wanted to do something like that. So there's lots of ways if you fancy it as a project and as a theme, there's lots of directions you could take. I thought for this week I'll just go through probably this picture I took on Saturday just over at Cherry Orchard Park. And the trees are really nicely turning now. We're getting some nice colours coming into them. So I'll do a little bit more to this demo. So I started this morning, so I just kind of did a section through that side. So I thought perhaps I'll do a little section through this side now and just add a bit more to it. This is the water mixable oils. So if anybody wants to try the water mixable oils, I've got a set here you can try. I've got a couple of sets you can try if you want to use those. With something like a landscape, if I can, in fact most subjects, if I can, I generally work background to foreground. So perhaps start with the sky and a little bit of the mid-ground and then come further forward. The other thing I do with the oils is I tend to work darker colours and then light colours. So I might put sort of a shadowy colour down and then I might put some light colours into that, just to lighten it a little bit. And the same with the sky, maybe a little bit darker and then maybe light in other areas. So I'll start with the sky, a little bit here, got a little bit mixed already. So I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue and cerulean blue, which gives me quite a nice mid-blue. So it's a greeny blue and a purpley blue mixed together. We'll get something a little bit in between. I think my white's got a bit complicated. So I can start to work that in. That's a little bit more ultramarine. If you've got something like cobalt blue, that's quite a sort of middle of the road kind of blue. With blue skies, quite often you find that it's more intense further up you go. So in some ways, your strongest blues you probably want at the top. And you could make it a little bit warmer as you're coming down. So you could add something slightly yellowy or orangey to the mix, just kind of make it less intense as you're perhaps coming a little bit further down. So I'll do that there, just made a slight alteration to the mix. And then I'll just wipe some of that off and just go a little bit lighter. So there are a few clouds here, I'll add a little bit in here. Again, that's gone a bit. So I can So with water mixable oils, I can work paint in, so get nice soft edges. It's a nice buttery creamy medium. I struggle a little bit with acrylics where it kind of holds every brush mark, whereas these I can soften, I can leave brush marks or I can soften them up. With the tree, I don't mind overlapping a little bit and perhaps having the paint slightly thin around here. Just sort of scrub that in so that it's covering the, like that. And then I'll just swap brushes, go for a different brush, just because it's having brown colours on. Perhaps get these nice dark shadows in to start with. So I've got some burnt umber here. Just pop that in anywhere where I want that nice dark shadow, and that kind of comes down to here. I don't mind it being, seeing a few of the brush marks. Sometimes I think that makes it a little bit livelier and a little bit more naturalistic. Sometimes they could, if I smooth all the brush marks out, I find it goes a bit flat. So work something up to there. That can be the shadow areas, and there's a little bit of shadow coming through here. Bring that through there. And just really work that into the board. That's a bit more down here, and actually under these shrubs here as well, a little bit shadowy. So use some, really just using the brown on its own, but I might just mix a slightly purply colour to go in there as well. So a little bit of blue and
So quick.
quick.
You got a poem, Merlin?
You've got to crack on this. I mean, something like this, it's not complicated drawing, and I can push the drawing around as I go. So that's most of the darks in. Right, I'll just give this a little bit of a wash and then dry it. I don't like little brushes too wet. I don't like to thin paint too much. So these tones to me are a little bit, they're not quite as bright as the ones here. So I've got a mix here, a slightly orangey mix. Maybe a bit more yellow with that. And just a touch of the browny colours I've been using. Let's put some of that in. So let's kind of get in the. So if you want to try and paint individual leaves, even with a brush that size, I can just make a few dots and dashes, and that, you know, sometimes that can be enough. If I just put those in lightly, that can be enough to suggest sort of leaves on the edge. So it doesn't all have to be done with tiny little brushes. If you go a little bit slow and a bit more gentle around there. These areas, they're fairly solid. So again, I can kind of scrub the paint in there. And I guess what I'm after is a genuine impression, an impression as much as of the light and darks as an impression of details. I think perhaps a little bit darker in there, a little bit more shadow there. Again, the nice thing about the oils, I can wipe bits back or scrape bits off if needs be. Come out here. This is where it pays to, well, sometimes it's quite handy to overpaint, but then again, you can end up picking up the colour underneath. So if I work into there, if I start to pick colour up, like the blue, I would just wipe my brush on a bit of rag and then go back to the mix. And then the last bit is just to go a little bit lighter. There's some nice light tones here. Slightly orangey. So just kind of work into that. It's fairly subtle, so I don't want it as bright as these ones. But it just helps to animate the whole scene. Something like that. A little bit here. And then this area here, that to me is a little bit pinker. So I'll add some white and some of my pinky colour into that. Again, just scumble, I think it's called. And you just sort of basically using the brush in different directions, just trying to sort of suggest textures. Just sort of grading. If you've got an underpainted colour, like, well, that bit of red was left from this morning. I was trying to demonstrate a rose bit, but if you've dragged over that, you can still use some of the colour underneath, so that can be quite effective. Almost like scrubbing the colour in, then that wiping most of it back, and then putting more colour over the top, and that will give you a kind of texture. So that sort of thing I could do here, perhaps, but just work that in. That. And then finally, these grasses, this colour can come down a little bit further, so a little bit more of the purpley colour, just bring that down a little bit. And that just gives me a background dark to work into. And again, most of this with the bristle brush, sort of hog bristle, it's quite a rough brush anyway, so it's quite a textured stroke. Ways of putting these in, I can go in, literally just paint straight in with a very light pinky straw colour, so something like that. And using and you can possibly just sort of splay the bristles a little bit. That will give an effect of grasses. I'm not over fond of the brushes that are designed just for grass. Sometimes they do the ones where they just cut this out, but that's one way. Go a little bit stronger colour. Just put some yellowy colours in with that. Vary that a little bit. Some people use these fan brushes. I saw a couple of people using these this morning, and what you need to avoid with these is just doing that sort of thing. Because I think it doesn't look great. You see it an awful lot in a lot of amateur paintings, and to anybody who knows what they're doing, you just know that's a fan brush mark. But there are ways of using them. You could perhaps just use them more vertically, or they're actually designed as a blender, a brush for sort of blending colours. Something like that might work. I know it's gone a bit too light. Another way is to just literally scratch into the surface. And again, if you've got the right sort of colour underneath, that can work quite nicely. You could use, for odd highlights, use a rigger brush, one that's in good condition, one that needs licking to make it stick together. And I find with the riggers you need to paint a little bit thinner, a little bit more fluid. So to get a fine line up like that, see that's almost a bit too heavy. But that can be useful for odd strokes here and there. The other method is to use a palette knife, the edge of a palette knife, which I've lost. This one, that one would do. That's not the one I want to do, but that one would do. So with a palette knife, you can almost sort of print marks on. So you could sort of do something like that. And again, that's a nice way of getting really fine marks. Can look a little bit mechanical because it's very straight. So maybe that and a few others as well. But they can contribute to creating an oval scene. So a few ideas for oils if you want to do. Or a lot of that's applicable with acrylic because you'd have to work very quickly to get it to blend.
So what colours was it used?
I've used burnt umber. There was a bit of orange, but I've then mixed an orange, but ran out of an orange. Titanium white. I think it was like a rose colour, sort of a rosy pinky colour or sort of magenta colour. And a couple of blues, ultramarine blue and cerulean blue. Yeah. I find that if I've got two yellows, well, particularly one yellow, like a warm yellow, like a cadmium yellow, pale. If I've got that, and I've got a couple of reds, but more particularly the sort of crimson reds, I tend to prefer rather than the orangey reds. And then two blues. I always like to have two blues, ultramarine and cerulean. And then burnt umber and titanium white. I find that takes me a long way. Just get a long way with just those. There's loads of other colours you could add in, but that's a good place to start.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll say lino printing next week for anybody who's interested, and I have got the materials in that I ordered, so there's enough lino for anybody who's interested.